I have one of the least popular jobs in the country, and I represent some of the least popular people in our societies. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and the number one question that I get asked is, how can you represent someone who you believe is guilty? How can you represent someone who you know has done something wrong? I used to struggle with that question, but as I've done it more and more in this profession, I've come to realize that not only can I represent people that may have done something bad, not only do I want to represent people who may have done something wrong, but I've also come to learn that I can love them as well. One of the reasons why I can represent people who may have done something wrong is because to do so supports the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution. The Sixth Amendment guarantees every person in this country accused of a crime the right to be represented by a criminal defense lawyer. That right is so important that even people who were the founders of the country took it more seriously than perhaps some do today. John Adams, the second president of the United States and a man who helped to write the Declaration of Independence, believed in that principle so strongly that after the Boston Massacre, where Bostonians were murdered and the accused murderers were British soldiers, it was John Adams who represented them. Abraham Lincoln was also, before he was one of the most popular presidents in our country, he was a criminal defense lawyer. And he didn't just represent people that were accused or even guilty of minor crimes. He represented people including up to murder. People that were accused of the worst crimes in our society. People that were the least popular in our societies. And the Sixth Amendment is not just about representation in general. It's also about zealous representation. Representation that is strong. In this country, unfortunately, many people don't have the resources to put up the defense. All of the resources are against them. The prosecution has almost all of the power. They have all of the police. They have all of the investigators. They have most of the expert witnesses, almost unlimited resources. The second reason why I can represent people who may have done something wrong is because to do so actually can make our communities safer. Now, that may sound counterintuitive to some, but please allow me to explain. In this country, in the United States, we have 5% of the world's population. But also in the United States, we have 25% of the world's prison population. Between 1970 and 2005, the prison population in the United States grew by a staggering 700%. That's certainly not because the population or because the crime rate grew by 700%. Not even close. We incarcerate more people per capita in our country than any other nation on the face of the planet. And if the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, we may well want to think about that when we think about incarceration. Studies show that lengthy prison sentences can, in some circumstances, actually lead to repeat offenses when the person gets out, making our communities less safe. We also know that with traditional means like probation and other alternatives to incarceration, such as drug treatment courts, alcohol treatment courts, veterans treatment courts for people that are suffering from PTSD and may have come home from war and committed a crime, or people that have an alcohol and drug addiction and need help on the front end to try to make it so that our society is actually safer, as opposed to just simply taking the easy way out and locking them up in a small steel cage. Now, to be sure, I don't pretend that some people don't belong in jails or prisons. Certainly, people that have committed violent offenses, murder, assault, sometimes prison is appropriate. Jail is appropriate for those folks. But we shouldn't pretend that our prisons and our jails are just filled with people that have committed violent offenses. We know that our prisons in the United States, approximately 50% of people are sitting in prisons right now for nonviolent offenses. Certain drug crimes, property crimes, and other public order offenses that do not involve the threat or actual harm to a victim. We also know that many of those folks could be out in our communities, rehabilitated, paying taxes to afford the $30,000 per year it costs per inmate to have somebody languishing in a prison cell. The third reason why it's important and why I can say that I proudly represent people is because to do so humanizes them. You see, I believe very firmly that no one person ought to be defined forever by his or her worst moment in life. And think about that for a second. Even if you've never committed a crime in your life, think about the worst thing that you've ever done, the thing that you would be most ashamed of and most embarrassed by. We are all human. Would any of us want to be defined forever by that moment? When a baby is born, the baby is born innocent. But if, as the baby grows up, the child is beaten, or the child is abused, or the child is neglected, or the child grows up around parents that have drug and alcohol problems, is it really any surprise that later in life he or she is far more likely to commit a crime? Is it an excuse? No. But it may well provide context and an understanding. So too with a puppy. When a puppy comes into this world, that puppy, if it's beaten and abused and neglected and not fed and not given water, would it be any surprise that that puppy may turn into a rabid dog that bites? You see, I believe so strongly in this that I can say that I once represented a young woman who was accused of breaking into homes and stealing items out of those homes and then going and pawning off the items, getting cash and using the cash to support her heroin habit. Serious offenses, no doubt. Ones that certainly could have sent her to prison for a very long time. And she didn't have the background to say that she had a bad upbringing. She actually had two wonderful parents, had a good upbringing, was doing extremely well in school, and had a very bright future. But as we dug more and more into her story, we found out that not only did she get involved with the wrong boyfriend, that boyfriend who was involved in a lot of illicit drug activity, she ended up getting hooked on drugs as a result. She ended up then ruining almost her entire life and was essentially destitute. She then found herself shackled, sitting in an orange jumpsuit and awaiting a hearing where the judge would determine whether she would be released from jail while her case was pending. Well, fortunately, I'm able to say that years later, this same woman is not only out, is not only successful and has a full-time job and is married and has a family, but she's also one of the most prolific speakers on drug and alcohol addiction and has helped countless people in her time out. That never would have been possible if the judge had done the easy thing, the politically popular thing, and sentenced her to prison. She never would have been able to help all of the people that she's helped. One of my favorite authors, Brian Stevenson, in his excellent book called Just Mercy, talks about, and to paraphrase him, that mercy is most important because it belongs to those who are undeserving. It's most potent when it goes to those who expect it the least. And so although I work in one of the most unpopular jobs perhaps in the country, and I represent some of the most unpopular people in our communities, I hope that I've expressed in some measure why defending people, even people who may be guilty of crimes, supports the Sixth Amendment. It can make our communities safer, and it humanizes people. Because no person ought to be defined forever by his or her worst moment in life.